Welcome to Zeph's house. Come in out of the dark and pull the door shut behind you. Tonight's tale is called Lake Carl. I was 13 the summer I learned what silence really sounds like. We'd moved into one of those developments that swallowed up farmland in the 80s, winding streets named after trees that didn't grow there anymore. Oak Ridge, Maple Court, you know the type. But ours was built around 4 lakes, and that made it different. The big one was man-made, carved out by developers who understood what the word lakefront does to a price tag. That's where everyone went. Pontoon boats, inflatable rafts, teenagers shrieking off the public dock, sand they trucked in fresh every spring. A suburban paradise with a clubhouse and a beach that didn't exist in October. The other 3 were natural. They'd been there long before the bulldozers, tucked back in the woods and half forgotten, strung together by trails so overgrown most of my neighbors never knew they existed. The smallest was Lake Carl. The developer had named each lake after one of his children. I never met Carl. Never learned a thing about him, whether he was the oldest or the youngest, whether he ever once stood on the shore that carried his name, whether he was even still alive. Just a name on a water nobody wanted, which was exactly why I loved it. You had to know the right trail, and even then you came out of it pushing through branches, stepping over roots that reached for your ankles. The shore was mud in spring and mosquitoes in summer. The other kids called it boring. They were welcome to, because Lake Carl had no pressure, no weekend fishermen with their fish finders, no tournaments, no limits anyone enforced. The bass in there were fat and slow and stupid, generations of fish that had never seen a lure they needed to fear. At the start of summer, I'd talk my dad into helping me drag a little aluminum rowboat down through the trees. 12 feet of dented silver that weighed almost nothing and leaked just enough to keep a bail bucket honest. We flipped it into the reeds and left it, and most mornings I'd ride down before the rest of the world woke up. Those mornings were mine. Just me, the mist, and fish that practically climbed into the boat. That morning started like all the others. I remember the ritual of it, waking in the dark, the house holding its breath around me, a t-shirt that already smelled like lake water, the empty streets, the click of the bike chain, the whisper of tires on cool asphalt, the trail damp, spiderweb strung with first light, dew soaking through my sneakers. I found the boat where I'd left it, flipped it, always checking for snakes first, a lesson I'd learned the hard way, and dragged it to the edge. The lake was glass, perfect unbroken glass, with mist sitting just above it like the water was breathing out. I pushed off. The creak of the oar locks, the soft break of the paddle, the mist parting at the bow and closing behind me like the lake was swallowing me whole. By mid-morning, I'd caught and let go half a dozen, kept 2 for dinner. 13 years old and king of my own small country. Around 10, I anchored near the middle, maybe 40 yards off a little peninsula that reached out from the western shore. Good structure there, sunk rocks, low branches, a raft of lily pads at the point. I'd pulled nice fish from that spot before. I cast. Watched the lure arc out, drop with a soft plip, and sink. And the summer wrapped around me like a blanket I didn't know to be grateful for. Birds calling across the water, insects droning in the reeds, rising and falling like something asleep. A frog, a fish rolling behind me, ripples opening in perfect circles. Real peace. The kind you don't recognize until you're older, and it's gone. I'd made maybe a dozen casts when the world changed. The birds stopped. Not Not the way they hush when a hawk slides over, not gradual. Instant. Like a hand had come down on the whole forest and pressed it flat. The insects, gone. The frogs, gone. Even the water seemed to hold still, the last ripples from my cast smoothing away to nothing. And the air changed. Heavier. Like the pressure had dropped ahead of a storm that wasn't coming. I sat with my rod half raised, suddenly aware of my own breathing, my own heartbeat. People say silence can be deafening. I always thought that was just something writers wrote. But that morning, the absence of sound pressed on my eardrums with a real weight. It was loud. It was wrong in a way I had no word for. I've only heard that silence once in my life. It was that morning. I don't know how long I sat there. Seconds, probably. Long enough to start talking myself out of it. Some weather thing, some trick of the lake. When I heard it, thump. One heavy impact. Deep and wet, like a boulder dropped into thick mud. From the peninsula, from back in the trees. I went still. My hands closed on the rod until the knuckles went white. You're hearing things, I told myself. A branch, a deer, something that makes sense. I stared into the tree line, into the dark between the trunks. 40 yards, close enough to see, too far to know. Nothing moved. 10 seconds. 20. My pulse was the only sound left in the world. And then, thump, 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 thump. 5 steps, heavy, evenly spaced, walking with purpose. Something was coming through the trees, and it was big. Through the gaps in the leaves I caught movement, a shape darker than the shadows it stood in. No outline I could name, no silhouette that matched anything I knew, just mass, just motion. Tall and broad in a way that didn't sit right. Then the smell reached me. I can only tell you it was wrong. Rot and musk, thick. Roadkill left days in the sun, and under it something alive. Wet fur, old meat. It didn't drift to me on the breeze. It hit me all at once, so heavy I could taste it. My eyes watered, my stomach turned. I should have gagged, recoiled, done something, but I couldn't move. My whole body had locked. A rabbit that's seen the fox. 3 more steps. Thump, thump, thump. Closer. Branches shifting now, shouldered aside by something passing through. Something tall, taller than a man has any business being. 7 feet, 8. I was 13 and terrified, and it was hidden in the trees. I couldn't give you a number, but I could feel its weight through the water. Each step sent the faintest tremor across the lake, tiny rings that reached my boat and rocked it, just barely. And then it made a sound. Not a growl, not a roar. A grunt, low, short, dismissive. Like it had seen me, like it had looked out through the trees at this stupid kid frozen in a rowboat and decided something. 4 quick steps. My heart stopped, every muscle braced for the thing I couldn't outrun, couldn't fight, couldn't escape. A tin boat in the middle of a lake, ringed by woods where no one would have heard me scream. But the steps grew softer, not closer, softer. It was moving away. I don't know why. Maybe it had somewhere to be. Maybe it had already eaten. And here's the thought that still finds me on quiet nights. Maybe it looked at me across 40 yards of open water and decided I wasn't worth the walk. The smell thinned, carried off on a breeze I hadn't felt arrive. And then, like a switch thrown, the birds came back. The insects took up their drone. A frog spoke in the reeds. The world clicked back on as if it had never been off, as if nothing had happened. I sat a long time. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. When I finally trusted my body, I lifted the anchor with both fists, and I didn't row. I paddled, slow, silent, away from that peninsula, toward the far shore, as far from those trees as the water would take me. I never made a sound. I dragged the boat up the bank, and I walked home. Didn't ride. Walked, bike ticking along beside me, looking back every few steps. I didn't tell anyone. What would I have said? I was 13, alone, with no proof but a bad smell and some footsteps in the woods. My mom asked what was wrong when I came through the door. I told her I didn't feel good, and I spent the rest of the day in my room, flinching at every sound the house made. I went back to Lake Carl a few more times that summer, but only when my dad came along. He thought I'd finally gotten social. I never told him why. It was a full year before I had the nerve to go alone, and even then I never stayed past mid-morning. Never let myself get comfortable. Never stopped listening for that silence. Eventually we moved. My dad's work, another state. We packed up and left, the way people do. I grew up, got married, lived in a dozen houses in a dozen towns. But sometimes when it gets quiet, really quiet, I'm back on that water, the silence, the smell, that grunt and what it might have meant. I tell myself it was a bear. On the good days, that's what I believe. Black bears get big in that part of the country, or a man living rough who didn't want to be found, or maybe a scared kid alone in a boat invented half of it, and the years filled in the rest. But I know what I heard. I know what I smelled. And I know that something stood in those trees and looked at me across 40 yards of open water, and then chose to walk away. Some questions don't get answers. I still think about Lake Carl more than I'd like to admit. Thanks for stopping by Zeph's house. If this one stayed with you, do me a kindness. Leave a like and subscribe so the door is unlocked when you come back. There's always another tale waiting. Until then, mind the quiet.